Hello and a very warm welcome. It's 3 o'clock, Sunday 31st of March. It's Mother's Day. If you're a mum watching, thank you for taking the time to peel away from the family and for me to answer your behaviour questions today. I'm here with Neve behind the camera. She has a number of questions for me lined up and we're going to look at addressing those for you. Please be sure to like and share the post. As a viewer, you usually are able to share the fact that you're watching it immediately. So if you can do that and that brings other viewers online, that's brilliant. So Neve, what do you have as my first question? Let's get the ball rolling.
Okay, first question's from Andrea, who says, how do I get my dog to come back inside at night after letting him out for a wee? He spends ages exploring.
Okay, Andrea. Actually, this is really quite a common question. We let dogs out into the garden, it's dark, we can't see what the dog's doing. Some gardens can be quite long and lots of bushes and the dog gets distracted. And so, in essence, what we're really looking at here is a test of the recall, because the dog's distractions are that much greater at night. You know, fresh scents when things get cold as well. The scent can tend to hang on the floor more. So it's a very interesting environment for the dog. So there's a few ways you can do this. You might like to keep by the back door, or whichever door it is that's letting you, giving your dog access into the garden, a little pot with some treats, and that these treats are soft but very high value, and you know your dog is really loving those treats, and that you can, when you let your dog out, you can see he's done his business, and then to give the pot a couple of shakes. Okay, using the dog's name and a really bright voice. So we're going to work our way through some of your options, because you may be saying, yes, well, I've tried that, that doesn't work. So I do realise that not every solution is just covers all scenarios. But for a lot of dogs, just simply having something really high value by the door will allow you to go to the first recourse, which is that high value food. Okay? When the dog, assuming the dog comes in, bring your dog to your feet, ask him or her to sit, and then you can shut the door, reward the dog, and you're done. All right. Just as a random other thought as well, when I put my own dogs out at night, I often have quite a powerful but small torch just by the door, and that allows me to keep the torch trained on the dog so I can see what they're doing. So that might be an option for you. Some people have passive infrared lights on the back of the building, so it illuminates the garden so you can at least see where your dog is. So those can be helpful little thoughts for you. But let's assume that your dog is hearing you, it may not be food motivated, and you're genuinely struggling to get your dog back into the home despite your best efforts. For that sort of situation, I would encourage you to spend a couple of weeks, maybe longer, where you proactively put yourself in the frame. So what I mean by this is that you bring your dog to the door, you ask it to sit, and then you clip a lead onto the dog. So you will need to have physical control. You take your dog out along with you to the garden. Your dog does its business, at which point you can reward the dog for doing so, if you feel that would help. And then you can walk your dog straight back in. Some dogs are less comfortable trying to do their business on a short lead, so you might prefer looking at using a flexi lead. That would be quite okay in your own garden, because it would allow you to remain attached to your dog. Hopefully your dog won't be going too far away, but once he's done his business, you can then come back in. So it's really setting up a new habit with those dogs which are particularly resistant. I think for it to come up as a question, there's a good chance that you would have already explored the shaking the treat box, and you know, here you are with a more frustrating issue. So if that is the case for you, it's a case of lead on, you go out with your dog, it does his business, you reward, come back in, and that you'll need to maintain that for maybe 2 weeks. You could then test it after a couple of weeks. If not, if that's still not looking right, you could go for another a week, or you may be looking up to a month's worth of effort. But it's really the sort of thing that as a the effort is, if this is put in with a puppy, then usually with adolescent or adult dogs we don't have that as an issue. We know the dog can go out, do its business, and then come back in, and then you reward the dog there. So okay, there's a few thoughts for you around the subject of letting your dog out into the garden and getting it back in from toilet training sessions. Thanks for the question, Andrea. Neve, what else do we have?
Okay, first one on a live, Francesca has said, I'm struggling to get my 10-week puppy to use toilet training pads going into the garden for the toilet. Do you have any advice on this?
Yes, that's Francesca, is it? Lovely to have you with us, Francesca. Thank you for your question. Toilet training pads. Now, I'm not alone in, the trainer element, being one that's not a great fan of toilet training pads. Why is this? Well, the problem with them is that it will encourage your dog to toilet in the home, and this is a habit that you will need to break later on. So in some respects, whilst I see the logic of toilet training pads, it allows your dog to do its business in the home, and this is assuming that your dog is using them, which is your problem, and then that's an issue you'll need to untrain later on as well. My advice to you is that in the absence of us having a conversation, which is the difficult thing, but I would encourage you not to use toilet training pads, and that you actually go down a road which it means a bit more effort on your part, but you know, having a puppy is hard work, or it can be, in the sense of you know, being on the go a little bit and having to watch them and monitor them and to be vigilant constantly, and that is a part of puppy training. And that I would try to find your puppy's frequency of needing to go out into the garden, and that you meet that dog's requirement. So if your puppy needs to go out every 30 minutes, then do that. If hourly is adequate, which 10 weeks was it, Neve? Don't worry too much, yes. But yeah, thank you. So 10 weeks is very, very young. You've probably only had the dog a week or two, and so you will really be in the midst of training your dog to toilet outside. I think we will come back to the subject of toilet training puppies today. There could be some other questions on this one, but you know, the thinking with toilet training a puppy is that you are very consistent, you're very regular, and that you reward the dog as a result, really, for what we do want, instead of you going into the kitchen or another part of the house, finding a puddle or worse, and then thinking, you know, that we're getting frustrated with the dog. Remember, the puppy is just, it's just a baby. It doesn't know its ears from its elbows, really. So it's our job to take the dog into the garden to a place where you would like it to relieve itself, to reward that behaviour there, and then to come back in. Might be helpful for you to set a little timer on your watch or on your phone, maybe every 30 minutes to begin with, and the idea is that we could push that into maybe 40, 45 minutes, 60 minutes as time progresses, okay? So those are the main things. And watching your puppy, you need to be watching constantly. If you can't watch your puppy, this is where the benefits of a crate can come in, because dogs will rarely soil in their own bedding environment. But this is assuming that the dog has, again, had adequate opportunity to get out into the garden. So again, place an emphasis upon what you do want. I would, I know I'm not quite answering your question, but I would circumnavigate the whole puppy pad issue, because I think it takes you down a road which isn't particularly helpful, that you'll need to address later on, and that you go straight really to the go mark, where you actually have a puppy which understands where it needs to go to toilet train. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for that. What else do we have, Neve?
Okay, Kerry has said, my dog is very good at recall unless there are other dogs about. He is not aggressive, just wants to play. How can I get him to come back to me instead of going off after his new friends? Yes,
okay. Well, at least the good news here is that your dog is just enjoying himself with other dogs. That's great. But of course, the recall really is only as good as it will be when it's tested, when your dog, when there's a distraction such as other dogs, other people, smells, you know, vehicles passing, whatever it is. And this is the true for every person with every dog. Your recall, again, is only as good as it actually is when the dog is distracted. And so learning to cope with distractions is actually what we're discussing here. There's no magical trick to this, because what I would actually suggest is that you come back to basics, and that what can happen is that dogs can get to adolescent or maybe even young adults, and we may in fact have some little holes behind us in the sense of the recall training that we maybe missed a little on the way to that dog's current age. I would introduce and use a long training line. It depends. Some dogs aren't terribly what I call rangy. A 30-foot line may be enough for some dogs, whereas a 50-foot line may be more appropriate for others. Most dogs will, I don't usually go longer than 50 foot. I have a 3-step process that I recommend for you with long training lines, and that you could devote a month to each of those 3 stages. Stage 1, you place the training line on your dog and you hold it for a month. You practice lots and lots of regular recalls where you're using all your body language and your facial expressions, you're using your voice and your enthusiasm to get the dog back. You've got the very highest value food that you think you can produce for your dog, and that you're putting everything you can into attracting the dog back. But let's say the dog ignores you. This is where your recall line comes into effect, because you can use that line to bring your dog's attention to you. If necessary, a wee bit of hand over hand to bring your dog in so he's actually coming in towards you. Because that point could be the most helpful for you, because currently when you're calling him, he's learning that he can ignore you. So the line eradicates the I can ignore you element. And once you get your dog in, you can reward, fuss, and then release to go off again. You may choose to go, if you bring your dog away from other dogs, you may choose to go over there and away from that, because it's your decision. You may not like quite the vibe of what's going on previously over in this area, and you can go in that way. Okay, so this is a decision that we all make as dog owners, and we're constantly thinking about the environment around us. So a month holding the line so you can enforce it quickly. The second month, assuming all is well at the end of month 1, is that you can let the line go and your puppy actually drags the line on the ground. Okay, then you still have the same principle, lots and lots of recalls every few minutes. Might be, just remember as well, not all dogs are motivated by food, so it might be a little toy, or some dogs just love to come back for some praise. So think about what motivates your dog to come back. So if you're calling your dog and he or she is ignoring you, we jump on the line, stand on it, pick it up, and then we can enforce it. But also if the dog's dragging the line, it goes further away from you, or your dog can go further away from you. So that you've got a month for each of those stages. Month 1 is holding, month 2 is dragging, and then you could spend a month, maybe there's a few ways you can do this. You could either put the line on and off the dog on occasional, maybe alternate walks to see how that looks. Sometimes you can, if it's a 50-foot line, you could you'll ruin the line in the process, but you cut the line down gradually over successive weeks. And so, because dogs can't measure, and you're sort of getting the line off, but in a very gradual way. Okay, so that's quite a crafty way of doing it. So ultimately, you might just have this much line on the dog because it's feeling it on its legs and its front, and mentally it can leave the dog thinking that it's still on the long training line. It isn't really, of course, and it's barely enough for you to grab. But hopefully you see my logic there. Long line, high value food, lots of toys, lots of enthusiasm on your part, and to make sure that the dog each and every time is being made with a little subtle influence of assertiveness on your part, to come back, because when we do this come on Frankie, and we're doing all this calling, there's this sort of subtle undercurrent which means now, because what the dog doesn't realise is that there could be a danger there that the dog doesn't perceive or see. So the recall, I would say, in public is one of the most important things. You know, it's all nice having a dog sitting and lying down and staying, but getting your dog to come back almost at the drop of a hat is a skill worthy of pursuing. So I do encourage you to do that. I wanted to dwell on the subject of the recall a little because, you know, it's things like toilet training and recall and barking. These are things that are constants, and that so many people will sort of prick their ears to these key subjects because so many people actually can have the same issue. So I hope that helps anyway. Thank you for the question.
Okay, next one comes from Rachel, who says, my cockapoo has started barking constantly when out on a walk and he sees other dogs. Any advice would be great. He goes to a dog walker once a week.
Okay, thank you for that one, Rachel. So dogs barking in public, most commonly the reason is because they're anxious, they're not sure about something, and the dog's natural response is to bark. I occasionally see dogs which bark in a more domineering manner, but that's not common, and most barking in public is due to anxiety or nervousness of some description. This is the sort of area that ideally we don't have time today, of course, but if we wanted to look into the past of your particular dog's behaviour, Rachel, we would get into, you know, what age the puppy was acquired, what sort of socialisation efforts were made from the beginning, and those are the sorts of areas that we usually, after that conversation, can say, well, right, your dog is barking because of this, but maybe how we address it still is very, like, there's a lot of consistency in how we go about addressing it as a problem. I think you'll need to establish, let's maybe give you this idea of what we could call a traffic light. So we have green, amber and red. If your dog is barking and going into a bit of a meltdown, then we could say your dog is in more of a red zone, not just in terms of temperature, but also in the sense of that traffic light. And we need to, when a dog is here's the problem, and your dog is getting too close here. When your dog is too close to something, we could be in that red light zone, and what we need is to increase distance and to come back, so that your dog is more in the amber come green type emotional field, and that he can cope. Okay, so as an idea, I hope that helps. So if you find that your dog is having a bit of a meltdown, try initially to increase the distance away from whatever your dog is barking at. Dogs can bark at a whole range of things in public, anything from other dogs, people, traffic, bags blowing around on the floor, anything. So regardless of what it is, try to back away and find a distance where your dog is comfortable. Easier said than done in public spaces, because you can't always control the environment, I know that. And get your dog to the point where ideally he or she will be able to sit down, and that you'll be able to get your dog into a calmer frame of mind, and that you can reward your dog for that type of behaviour. So that we're using distraction techniques, usually high value food or a toy of some nature that you maintain control of is a good way forward, because you want to try to get your dog mentally less fixated on what it was barking at, and to maybe come and look at you, and to be in the bubble, as I often call it, that bubble with you, and not so worried about that other dog. I know it sounds rather simplistic saying, well, just produce a bit of chicken or high value food, but actually if this is done in the right way consistently, you know, usually I'd spend 3 or 4 hours with a customer putting this sort of program together and looking at other areas. But I'm really giving you a really reduced version of this, but you try to find your dog's green amber zone in relation to the problem, and that we get the dog to sit, to pay attention to you, and you feed and reward your dog for behaviour that you wish to encourage. Okay, you need to get your dog out every day, ideally in daylight, in areas geographically and at times of day where there is enough stimulation, but so that you have more of an amber type environment, but ideally not so much that your dog is having a meltdown in that red light environment. So try to find the right type of vibe for your dog. Think about time of day, the actual locations, the days themselves, because somewhere rural in the middle of the day in the week might be very quiet, but midday on a Saturday could be very, very busy. So maybe reserve those busier environments for a time when you know that your dog is feeling more relaxed and more able to cope. Okay, so try to reward the dog for what you do want and to build up gradually to that the more difficult scenarios. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. I realise it's very difficult. It is a very very difficult area to discuss comprehensively, but it's just some little thoughts there for you. Okay, thank you for that.
Hey, Alex has written in and said, my 16th-month-old dog is scared of people. We've had him from a pup and he's never had a traumatic experience with humans. How can I help him? He also pulls on the lead. Is there anything I can do to stop him? Then goes on to say, I have tried to stop every time he pulls and have done this for over 2 months. We've had some improvement, but he still pulls a little.
Okay, so one thing at a time. Pulling on the lead is very common. It's one of the most difficult ones for me to address looking into the camera, because it's like a practical issue, and I would really like to have the opportunity to work with you and I watch you with your dog and see how you're managing your dog, and then obviously it's relatively easy as a bystander to say, well, you need to change this and that, and look at different things that can make a difference. So in conclusion, you might well benefit from spending an hour or two with a trainer, somebody that's used to looking at that sort of behaviour. It could be a good investment for you, because having a dog pulling on the lead is no fun, and that's something I do encourage you to address. Having said that it's difficult to address online, watch out for the way you're leaving the home with the dog. What you don't want is to be opening the door and your dog to be charging out and you barely able to have the time to turn around and lock the door behind you. Leaving the home calmly is assuming that you go down to the pathway and then out onto the pavement, which is not an unusual scenario, and your dog's already pulling. That walk and that excitement all starts in the home. So open the door an inch. If your dog goes to charge through it, watch his nose, but just carefully shut the door. So do some opening and shutting of the door, and then you can open the door further and more rather, until your dog is looking up at you, and if to think, well, this is a bit unusual, what are you doing? If your dog looks up at you or steps back, then you know your dog is beginning to pay attention to you, and that's a really good indication. Take your time at the doorway. If you get, say, this much daylight open on the door and your dog rushes, then just stop the dog with the lead, shut the door and start again. So get this point where you can gradually open the door enough for you to slip in front of the dog, so you're stood outside facing the dog as the dog is sitting on the front mat in the front door mat inside the house. If you can get that, that's quite a really good start. Count to 5 and then say, come on then. And that can make such a big difference, because then what we're really doing is managing emotions. I realise even with the technique I've just advised you or offered you, the dog's emotions will still be coming up, but at least not like a rocket, and that's often what we have to struggle with on the lead when we're at the pavement. So the way we leave the house, I've lost count literally over nearly 20 years, the amount of times I am surprised at what a positive impact that can have on actually then a dog that pulls. Very quickly, pulling, there are things like, equipment wise, we have a range of head harnesses. I won't go into brand names, but there are head harnesses which tend to come over the nose and either connect under the chin. I prefer the sort where it comes under and it connects to the back of the neck. That's more symmetrical and has a less sort of jarring effect from side to side, and when the dog pulls, it pulls his head down, and that does have a bit of a braking effect on the dog. You can also get body harnesses. Bear in mind there's two types of harnesses, like a fixed body harness where we just clip them in and it's all adjusted and we walk along with that. Or you can get anti-pull harnesses which have a slight restrictive element when the dog's pulling. Either sort of a slight tightening under the armpits for the dog or maybe across the chest. I prefer the ones that sort of tighten a little across the chest. They don't harm the dog, and that's a good way for you to work it. So you might have some magical improvements with equipment. It can happen. I, however, prefer to use good walking technique with a nice broad lead, soft lead, no chains, and a nice broad fabric collar, which has got a good strong buckle, and it maybe with some sort of Velcro type fastening back. Once you've got that on, we can then depend on technique, and that's where my help might become a bit thin now, because ideally I would demonstrate that to you. We can stop when the dog pulls, but you need to stop, maybe shuffle back a pace or two, wait for the dog to be genuinely calm and the lead to be slack, and then that's your green light. Then you can move forward, and you may need to do that. Don't focus so much on going for a big walk. Just go 20-30 feet up and down the pavement and keep working on that every day until your dog is getting in the groove. We're not looking for Cruft style obedience, but we do want a dog nicely alongside us. Have some high value food on you. Reward the dog for a position you do like, okay? And when you are walking your dog's nicely alongside you, be sure to sort of drop in that just quietly, like, good boy, that's nice. And he'll hear that because your voice is here, and your dog ideally is only 4 or 5 feet away from you, listening to you, okay? So there you go. Despite the restrictions of being online, that's a good broad overview of pulling. But often dogs are pulling because they're excited, so if you can manage that excitement, that makes a big difference. Now, actually, the two go hand in hand. If you've got a dog barking that was barking in public,
he's a bit traumatised by people.
Men, beg your pardon, yes. So that might be more in the house, and it could let itself be seen in public occasionally as well. But usually, if you have in a dog, we have, say, the the pulling element, and then we have the nervous element towards men, and if in fact you can address the pulling, then in a funny way it can have a positive effect on other areas as well, and vice versa. So if we can address the men scenario, then that can help with pulling, because it's all like anxiety and the dog is getting uptight. Be careful not to force your dog to, I'm probably stating the obvious, but not to force your dog into situations where we're saying, look, here's a man, you come and say hello. Let your dog actually do this upon his own terms. If you have a male coming into the home, get that person to simply ignore your dog. If we can rule out aggression because you're not suggesting it here, and your dog is probably being more evasive and could be hiding that type of behaviour. So I'm going to make that assumption for now. And you'll just need to gradually build a positive association towards men. And it can be men more than women that tend to cause this issue, simply because men tend to be taller, they have deeper voices, they're bigger framed usually, and this for some dogs can be a bit intimidating. Again, if we were to get into it, it's almost certainly an issue in the dog's very early socialisation period, and that could account for it. But try to have a variety of situations with men where your dog is able to warm up to that person gradually without forcing the dog into that sort of situation. Okay, use high value food. If you think your dog likes a bit of liver or chicken, then just get the man to throw that over to the dog, okay? And without us trying to go over and, oh, it's all right, you don't need to worry about me, I won't harm you. So I know that's well intended, but it can be just really what the dog doesn't want. So we have to, I'm afraid, go at the dog's speed and to allow things to warm up gradually. So I hope that helps. As always, if you are really struggling with this, and because I like to give as comprehensive as help as possible, and I know I can go possibly a bit too in depth, but if you're still struggling, just drop me a line on my website, alphadogbehaviour.co.uk/contact, and I will do my best to address it for you there. Okay, before I take the next question, again, remember to like and share, please, the Facebook Live, and that is always welcome. Also, depending on the time, we might well have my little puppy Ruby come in. She's out being walked at the moment, so whether she comes back in a fit state for me to lift up, I don't know. Is that picture of Ruby in the shot? So that's little Ruby. She was only that was only about a month ago or 3 weeks ago, and that's Big Max. Little Pip is probably just behind me in that photo. So Ruby is just coming up for 6 months in mid-April. So yeah, she's doing so well. And she lost one of her little canine teeth today. She's got all her adult teeth at the front, her little incisors, and all her adult teeth are coming, her molars and premolars are all coming down. But these little fangs seem to be the last ones to go. So she lost a fang this morning, which was a bit weird. So good, thank you for that. Neve.
Okay, Claire says, my golden retriever is very laid back at home and probably bottom of the pack, living with 3 cats. Unfortunately, when he goes out, he can be very unpredictable with other dogs. I usually turn and walk away if I see another dog and avoid situations. His recall is great, but he seems to switch off from me and growl, and last year did pin a dog down. It was awful. Any advice at all would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. That sort of scenario, let's take the subject heading of dog-to-dog aggression, which roughly as a umbrella heading we are in with this question. The variety of behaviour one can encounter under that umbrella heading can vary massively. Anything from a dog just wishing to avoid and to go in a different direction, all the way up through to scenarios where a dog is going out of its way to be overtly aggressive towards other dogs, and that is very, very difficult to manage. But it sounds to me as though you're somewhere sort of floating around in the middle in terms of seriousness of that behaviour. It sounds as though you're managing and coping for the best part, but of course we don't really want to spend 15 years with our dog managing or coping. That's not fun at all, and it doesn't need to be that way. Again, as with many of these questions, I would ideally like the privilege of more time to have a two-way conversation about the problem, and so that we can build a better picture. There are a couple of things though, based on what you've said in your description, that I would introduce to help ensure safety and control. And certainly if we have more control of our dogs, then actually if that's adequate and it's effective, then we can and should be able to stop our dog from engaging in those sorts of behaviours. And so that is always the first step to bringing the frequency, say this is 10 times out of 10 and it's happening a lot, to maybe somewhere where we're down to only 30% of the original problem. It may be more, it may be a bit less, but we could probably make a guess that through management alone, we would be able to bring those events down. And of course, the point I'm making here is that what a dog practices, be it good or bad behaviour, it gets better at. So if it's able to spot another dog, your dog is loose, your heart is then in its mouth, it charges off to get involved in a scenario that you really don't want him to do. So the question for you is, what control do you have of your dog? Now, Labradors are very often food motivated, food driven. So with your recall, one of the second or third questions I answered this morning was, I talked at length about my 3-stage recall. Stage 1, you hold the long line. Stage 2, you let it drag, and then stage 3, you remove it. That doesn't necessarily need to be over a 3-month period for each stage. A month for each stage, bringing up to 3 months. It could for some dogs be 6 months. It doesn't matter. You progress at the speed your dog is able to cope with. So by putting a long line on your dog, that would give you some control back. It would also allow you to give the dog plenty of freedom and exercise, and but if you see something occur, then you can regain control. Now, very often a phrase I find myself using with owners when talking about dog-to-dog issues is that we need to avoid avoiding. But of course, we also need to get into with meeting other dogs, because remember, the vast majority of other dogs in public are generally under control and actually pretty friendly. You'll need to use your discretion when going to meet other dogs, but this is something that I would encourage you to do. If you are genuinely concerned that your dog could bite or nip another dog, or to use its mouth in a holding and grabbing manner, which we really don't want your dog to do, then I would introduce and use a muzzle, okay? And a soft black basket style muzzle allows the dog to pant, to drink water. We can feed the dog through that muzzle. And if you take your time, maybe a week or two, introducing that muzzle, that can address the safety element. So the safety element is addressed with the muzzle, the control is addressed with the long line, and once you have those two things under your belt, so to speak, as your first steps, then you can think, right, well, I feel a lot more confident, I'm in control, and now I can go into situations that previously I may have been avoiding. Now, I know that a dog on a line and muzzled, excuse me, can still play up, but we can take a few more risks knowing that nobody or no other dogs are going to be hurt, all right? With situations like this as well, given that most dogs can, there are many dogs that behave in the way you're describing with your Labrador, but actually they just under the surface, with repeated exposure to some of the same dogs, that dog is still actually quite able to make friends. So look out or make some investigations into things like dog walking groups. Try to speak to the person running the group. A lot of these weekend groups or weekday groups are run with a view to increasing social or sociability of dogs, and there may be a few other dogs there which also are a bit touch and go. But you know, actually in groups I find that the dogs can be a little bit fractious initially, but once we get moving and the dogs are all rolling in the same direction, on leads, muzzled if necessary, then they will and often can settle down. So there are things like that that you can do to help improve your dog's behaviour. And just the fact of that avoiding the avoiding, and maybe thinking, well, I won't, if you've got a dog here and you're over here maybe 30-40 feet away, rather than just going out of the park, you know, you might sort of subtly go past that other dog. So you don't have to go directly into things, but you can sort of work your way around and try your luck a bit. You know, maybe if there's a park bench here, you come up, sit your dog with you as you sit on the bench, feed your dog, distract your dog, keep him under control here. Because we do know that whilst, and obviously this is lacking a conversation with you, but all the time you are just avoiding each and every situation, then your dog will never improve. Other dogs end up becoming a bit of an obsession for your dog, because we're not getting in and actually having some social time with other dogs, okay? Another little tip I'll leave you with is, if you've got friends or family with calm dogs, maybe ideally similar sizes, then you could arrange to meet them there. Yes, I'm just coming into the park now. Yeah, I see you. You're on your phones. Okay, if you stay there, this is your visiting dog and helping person. They could be on a park bench or something, and you could do some successive walk-bys. okay, maybe starting at quite a good distance initially, then you just do like this like S shape, so you get closer and closer each time as you pass. So you could get your dog to sit and wait, maybe 20-30 feet away. We get closer, dead opposite your helper. This person really with their dog is not doing a great deal. They're just being there helping you, and that you can then move on. So you could walk around them, you could do all sorts, okay? If you can get a handful of people like that that could help you, that can make such a difference. And ultimately you would get them walking alongside you. So we do what's called some parallel walking. You could have the handlers and then the dogs on the outside. And then you could come up to the end of the park and turn around, and then you have the dogs on the inside. But as always, keep a nice safe distance. Your dog's behaviour will be the barometer, if you like, as to how well he or she is coping with it. If it starts getting a bit too heated, you will, or rather too close, you'll see that because your dog's behaviour will deteriorate. So that ongoing barometer is different for all people and all dogs because every situation is unique. But that's those are some of the thoughts there that I would sort of throw over very quickly for you to take on board with a view to improving that behaviour. Okay, so I hope that helps, but thank you for the question. It's another very common area.
Okay, Sophie says, do you have any recommendations for dealing with bangs when out on a walk? One of our 3-year-old retired greyhounds is terrified of the bangs when we're out walking, such as bird or crow scarers in farmers' fields. She always tries to dash, then shivers and quakes, and it takes her a while to accept any food. Any tips to get her feeling relatively comfortable about bangs or loud noises? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. So that's come up on a number of visits that I've done where people say to me, we're out walking in a rural environment is quite often the case, and there's either a crop scarer or there's somebody shooting a quarter of a mile away, and the dog can hear that and can then go into its flight mode. As you're probably aware, we have the 3 Fs, the fight, the flight, which is what we're looking at here, and then the freezing mode. Okay, dogs don't very often freeze. I have seen it occasionally, but most dogs will then resort to trying to run away. So, especially with bangs and noises in public. And what they can do is sometimes the dog will run back to the car or it will run back to the house. It really depends on the dog. Some dogs will just run blindly and get lost, and that's, we then have a lost dog on our hands. So that's not an unusual scenario. If you think your dog is in danger of any of those, then you need to have a line on your dog. Okay, I know it's restrictive, but you have to ensure that your dog always comes back to you if it becomes suddenly frightened about something. So out again with the good old trusty training line, 30 or 50 feet, maybe longer, especially maybe longer if you're in really flat open spaces where you could sometimes go 100 feet line and it's not a problem for you or the dog. And so if there is any concern, we can at least ensure that the dog is coming back to you. That's the first box that we need to tick, which is safety, and that we address how much control we've got. Then coming back and looking at the big picture, we need to think about how we can desensitize your dog to those sorts of sounds. I honestly would look at a commercial CD. There's a few, if you go and look on Amazon, there's a few there that have recordings of a variety of sounds, and things like crop scarers, shotguns, they're quite common on these CDs. The idea of this is that this is the difficulty, is that you're actually doing some desensitizing in the home that we hope, usually it works, I've had good success doing this, but that we then hope works well for us in public spaces away from the home. Okay, that's the great difficulty, because the home is a controlled environment and out in public, well, it isn't. So you will need to select the tracks with those particular noises. I suspect that your dog may not react well to things like fireworks as well. So quite honestly, I would, if the CD is 60 minutes long, I would let the whole CD play. The idea is just a couple of things. We play the CD, start at absolute minimum volume. That's the idea, because then with successive days and weeks, we increase the volume gradually, which is in keeping with your dog's ability to cope with the sounds. Make sure the sounds are played back on a decent sound system, so not a little tinny stereo. It will possibly need to be like a decent TV, or maybe a stereo system that you could play a CD on, or that you could maybe play some MP3s over Bluetooth, something like that. But often the dog is your gauge. If you can see when the volume is increasing that the dog is reacting negatively, well, at least you know that your efforts will work, and then you need to just come back on the volume. When you're playing these audio tracks, it's very useful to try to distract your dog with something like a stuffed hollow rubber toy with some delectable food of its favourite type. Either that, or if your dog is fed a dried food and it's very food motivated, you can get like food cubes or balls with little adjustable apertures that adjust how much food comes out of that device. So there's quite a few things that you in theory could do to distract your dog into something positive and nice whilst it's hearing, albeit at very, very low volumes to begin with, something that isn't so nice. And that what we hope to do is to sort of gradually lever the two, so that we're bringing up the volume but very, very gradually, whilst maybe extending the period of the actual desensitization session as well. So keep a little notebook as well of your progress. It's quite nice to say how long the session was. You could maybe score your dog out of 10 in the sense of how well it coped. And you could also drop in any random comments on the dog walks. Okay, so it's a real sort of, again, a real quick download of how I think we would manage that. Control when you're out, so the dog can't bolt away from you, that you have a problem, and that gradual desensitization in the home, so that is a skill your dog can take with you into public when you're testing those walks. Okay, quarter of an hour. What else have we got, Neve?
Okay, so Rachie has said, we got our little one, who's a Pomeranian, just under 2 years ago. He was a rescue, but we don't know what happened to him. He has come on leaps and bounds in the house, no issues at all. It all starts on walk time. I'll put his harness on and his lead, and he gets excited because he knows he's going outside, and then everything seems to petrify him. We encourage him with treats, but he won't take them. I tried to bring some fun into it and bring him out for a run, but he went to ground and put his ears and tail down, and refuses to move or walk. I even take my other dog out and try and get him to run or walk with us then, but he just seems to be scared of everything, including the lead moving, wind and so on. Any advice for what you could say or suggest would be great.
Oh, what a problem for you to have to deal with. And again, although this general comment isn't immensely helpful for you to resolve it, but almost certainly we have a dog which is, or rather was not adequately socialised. Socialisation in young dogs is a window which closes, or a door that closes about 14-16 weeks. And what we do prior to that, usually we acquire a puppy at 8 weeks. I know this doesn't apply to you, but we acquire a puppy often at 8 weeks, and then that 8 to 16 weeks is our period to sensibly go about introducing our dog to everything. And if that's done thoroughly and thoughtfully, then usually we end up with a dog which is lovely and balanced and confident, which is not what you're experiencing. Even whilst I'm on the subject of socialisation, even what the breeder does with your dog from 0 to 8 weeks can have a profound impact. Puppies which are not exposed to anything except maybe their other litter mates and their mother in a shed, you're going to end up at 8 weeks with a puppy which is sort of behind the curve in the sense of where it could be. Okay, so I was just my soapbox rather about socialisation, because so many young dogs and adult dogs suffer because the socialisation wasn't adequately thought about or addressed. Your question is, so your problem with your dog is so what you might call all pervasive, which means it is just all over the issues, that you will need to give yourself plenty of time. I have been to many homes where people say to me that maybe they got this rescue dog a year ago and I come in a year after that, but they will often recount to me how bad the dog was when they first got the dog, and that they persisted, they stuck with it, and actually so what I'm often getting is a story of the past. And the reason I tell you that is that I just want you to stick with it. I think that you would benefit from getting some professional input and advice, so that you can at least be given some techniques and methods, so that when you are going out with your nervous dog, that you can help to guide her through these various situations. Okay, dogs do have a lovely capacity for recovery, and I'm sure she's in a very loving and caring home with you, but it can be very overwhelming to a dog that didn't have that real exposure and socialization, but they are often very good at playing what you might call catch up. I think in my own profession of going to people's homes and looking at behaviour problems, I probably would have given up many years ago if I wasn't seeing the dog's ability to improve and to change. They can, but you will need to look at not particularly doing anything magical, but just persisting. I want to use the analogy again of the traffic lights. Try to keep your dog in a green come amber type environment, which means things that roughly she can cope with. If you feel you're getting into the red zone, then you'll need to back off, but keep pushing every day and keep an eye on making progress, so that you, as you feel actually looking back on the situation a few months down the line, you think she's better, I'm going to try this, I'm going to take her to a marketplace today, or a car boot sale, or anything that you think is quite, or would have been quite difficult previously. So keep pushing. I'm just going to say that you need some professional help and advice for this, but just gently keep pushing in that amber realm, and I'm sure that you will see some improvements. You could incidentally look at some, without going into brands, but look online for things like herbal calming remedies. I wouldn't want you to drug your dog, which is, you know, veterinary care. It's not necessary. So we're looking at herbal remedies. There are a good number available online. So do your research, and that could at least allow your dog's nervous system to be more relaxed, and that it can take on the various things that you're trying to expose to her. Okay, I do hope that helps. Good luck in your efforts.
Sue said, I've got a cat question for you.
Always like a cat question.
Why has my newest cat, who has been neutered and she's had her for 8 months, who is about 2 years old, never messes in the house, gets on with other cats, but all of a sudden she started weeing in front of the door. Do you have any ideas?
Okay, well, for dogs and cats, any what you could call sudden onset behaviours, which is roughly what you're describing, would suggest some emotional upset. Now, I can't tell you what that is, because I can't have the conversation with you, and you may not even know, even if we may draw a blank even after a long conversation, because it might be something like a new cat on the block, you know, and she might feel that her territory has been threatened. You know, depending on the type of environment you live in, some environments can actually, the cat density can be quite an issue, and that we have anxiety in our cats because of the influence of other cats, which is very difficult because, of course, we can't really control cats that easily, especially if they are going out into public and then coming back. So wetting or urinating really in a marking sense near the front door would suggest some sort of sense of territorial behaviour. There are, for cats specifically, a number of calming remedies on the market, and I would suggest you try that as a first step. Also look into various products that genuinely remove the urine in that location, because cats and dogs will often come back and urinate in the same area, and that's something that can be avoided. You might like, this may or may not help, but it's worth a whirl if you know your cat is litter trained, litter tray trained, then providing 1 or 2 of those in the home near that location may be helpful. But there is a difference, of course, between urinating and then marking. So, but worth a go, and I would go down that route, and maybe see if you can do some detective work, see if there's a new cat on the block, and that could help explain it. But hope that helps. 5 minutes to go, Neve. What are we doing? What else have we got?
So Anne has messaged saying, "Hi Nick, I have an 18-month-old Italian Greyhound male.
Yes.
Fit and healthy in all respects, except he will not eat.
Oh.
He will maybe eat a small meal and then pick for the rest of the week. I've had dogs for over 50 years and never had one that's been as fussy as him. Do you have any advice to encourage him to eat?"
Thank you for that question. And how old was that dog? Sorry, Neve.
18-month-old.
18 months. So he has all his adult teeth. We know there's likely to be no soreness there, although, by the way, always worth having a good check of the dog's teeth to make sure that there's no issues there, so there's no discomfort when eating. Now, little Ruby here is, she loves her food, but she is a more picky eater than Max. Max would eat a whole bag of food, I think, if he had the opportunity. And little Pip, my Border Terrier, would also eat a whole bag of food. So I've been very used to dogs which are generally greedy and need to be managed and will, around food, and will eat anything. Whereas little Ruby, bless her, she enjoys her food, and I think we found a brand which is right for her. But what I'm trying to say here is that all dogs are different. Now, Italian Greyhounds, what a beautiful breed. I've met a few, and they're one of the most dainty dogs. I absolutely adore them. I could imagine that is the sort of breed that might be picky with its food. Again, we need a conversation, but I would try some wet foods. There's quite a few foods on the market which come in plastic trays with a clear film on the top, and those foods are quite firm, can be served them at room temperature, not chilled. I often find the dog likes it a bit more that way. And just cut out the amount you need for your dog, maybe a quarter or a third or a half for the meal, and then put that into a bowl. See if your dog likes that. Some dogs can be a bit concerned about the bowl it's in, so sometimes the feeding location and the bowl, whilst I don't want you pandering too much, but actually it's just worth ticking those things off mentally so that we know that that isn't a concern for your dog. Okay, so apart from experimenting a little with different brands of food, that could be a way forward. Some dogs love raw food, some dogs love the type of food I was just describing, like a pre-cooked wet food. Some dogs prefer grain. Sorry, I didn't mean grain, I mean kibble. So just try to experiment with different foods, and then at least once you've done all these different experiments, you'll know. Hopefully you'll hit the nail on the head and find a brand that's right for your dog. Okay, again, if you'd like to continue that conversation with me directly, drop me a line, alphadogbehaviour.co.uk/contact. I think we've got about a minute left. Have we got a quick one we can do?
Sharon has said one a little similar to one of the ladies before. She says, "How can I get my pug to listen to me? She is 1 year old and I may as well talk to myself."
Pugs, you've got to love them. Cheeky little dogs, aren't they? Try to find your particular dog's motivation. Usually it's one of three things: food, toys, or you. Or maybe a blend of all three, okay? Maybe you and your dog would benefit from some formal training classes, so that if maybe this is your first dog, you're given those basic skills, and that you could then come away and practice at least the basics: the sit, the down, the stay or the wait, the stand, the recall, the walking to heel. Those are all things really worth addressing as your basics, and I encourage you to undertake those as your starting point. And being sure that when you do ask your dog to do something, there's a gentleness and a loving interaction between the two of you, but that you feel, because you're having a bit more of an intense one-to-one training session with your dog, that she is listening to you, okay? So that, I'm sure, is where you need to look, is to start at the beginning, and then once you've got your basics in place, you can begin to add on top of those. So that brings us to the end of our hour. I can never believe how quickly it goes. I'd just like to say how much I enjoy doing these, folks. I am next due to do a joint, unless this changes, but it's not changing at the moment, a joint questions and answers with Petplan's vet Brian Faulkner, and I will be travelling over to meet with Brian, and we will have a joint Q&A. That is the Sunday 26th of May, probably at the same time, 3 p.m. Details will come up closer to that time. I'm really looking forward to doing that one, because I've always felt that there are two main principles with our animals. One is its behaviour and the other is its health, and the two of course are connected. So Brian and I get on really well, and I think it will be fun and informative. So watch this space. And yeah, so we're a bit like a double act. Again, please like and share. Thank you for watching. Enjoy Mother's Day, those mums out there. And regardless of whether you're a mum or a dad or what have you, have a lovely Sunday afternoon. We are going to have a little barbecue this afternoon. The weather is just about held up, in the sense that it's not raining, so that was the bare minimum. If it's not raining, we'll call it a day. So a little barbecue here at home. I'm sorry Ruby didn't turn up. Next time I hope to show you Ruby, so my apologies. That would have been fun to have her here, and she's just like a little squiggle thing. But so thank you for watching. Enjoy your Sunday afternoon. Bye for now.